And also, honestly, just telling the people that you know, because you never know when someone might come across a business opportunity that they've heard about somebody who's selling, or they've heard about somebody who had, a crisis of some sort and is looking to offload clients or whatever the situation is. And again, you don't have to buy the whole business, right?
Most of the time when you're buying parts too. You can buy a team, you can bring assets.
Exactly.
Even customers. There's different ways that you can split up the companies.
Yep. And most of the time you don't want to buy the business. You want to buy the assets. The only time you're going to buy the shares of the business, because the risk there, right, is if you buy the shares of the business, you're buying the liabilities of that business. You don't want that.
Hey everyone, it's Tamara Thompson with Women Unlocking Wealth, and I'm here with my co-host, Danielle Thompson. Well, we're super excited for this series. This show is brought to you by Broadcast Your Authority, where we come in and we talk to women experts and founders that really understand this movement that we're trying to get the women in the world out of the 1.9% of women generated $1 million basically on annual runs and other things. And I was like, 1.9%, that is ridiculously small. And our guest today, we're going to dive in and talk a little bit more because she helps with a lot of different sides of the business on the scaling side, acquisitions, and she knows her stuff. So we're going to welcome Juliet Peters, the founder of Framework Legal here in Scottsdale, Arizona. Welcome so much for joining us today. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to be here. And I love talking about this topic because when I first heard those statistics, which wasn't even honestly that long ago, it was really shameful. I was like, what? That can't be right. I had to look it up for myself. And I was like, oh my God, it absolutely is right. Yeah.
We literally have this conversation probably every single week. We're literally like, how can we help more women or educate more women to really step up out of their, comfort zone, step into confidence, and really understand that they have what it takes to have $1 million business, to generate $1 million in revenue each year, to turn into multi-million-dollar businesses. Because a lot of the times women get held back behind the scenes, and and I don't want to say that it's always a confidence thing, but a lot of the times I think that a lot of people do have this fear of what if, or what are my next steps, or not taking the next steps to hire a mentor. Share a little bit more about how you work with business owners and how you've kind of helped them bust through those barriers.
Yeah, I think that, I'll start with kind of where I came from, which was when I first started my own business. I really wanted to work exclusively with women-owned businesses and women founders. And then I found out really quickly, and this was a decade ago, right, that there weren't that many women businesses that were at a financial level where they would be hiring a lawyer. I mean, sometimes I get people at the start of their trajectory and they needed more like startup kind of work. But the vast majority of women did not have big enough businesses that they were accessing legal services. And so, that is beginning. It's really just beginning to change now. I mean, that number, 1.9% don't crack seven figures. I mean, that tells you that anybody who does is in rarefied air. And I think the picture is, it's a little bit more complicated for women than it is for men, because we have a number of factors we have to deal with. And one of them is mindset around money. That is a huge issue. And, you got to do some real sloggy work. And a lot of that is not necessarily from you've got to get help with that, because we don't even know sometimes what our own my limitations are. I mean, I know when I started accessing a coaching program, I had a ceiling. I never knew I had a ceiling,
it's
right?
Like that glass ceiling that's not really there. People are like brush through that glass ceiling and it's like, got to get to this next level. And,
but I had a money ceiling where I thought
like her
I
money
was
story.
and a lot of it had to do with what my thought process was around what I was deserving, what, how I saw money. Sometimes, like for me, my money thing was I saw money as a corruptor. And so, you don't want to hit that level where you would have enough that you could have money as a corrupting influence on your life.
I think a lot of people have this crazy mindset. I know Danielle, like, growing up and like, what was your thoughts about money and like, even with family, like sides of like the root of money being evil, a lot
I mean, like, so when you come from, low middle class, like there's a lot of different things that you need to do. And my family, and I love them to death. I don't want to speak poorly of my family, of course, but it's like one of the things where you have to have a continuous growth mindset. If you want, like for me, I was like, I need to go to school. Like I need to go to college. I need to get a better education and learn how to grow a business, because like I had an interest in growing businesses. And so once you hit like six figures, you're like, yay, this is fun. And like, so you're super excited about that. But then
really
you hit
excited about it because if you grew up that way and it's not been around you, like that's so empowering though too. But then you like think like, oh, am I deserving?
Yeah.
Like you said. And I think a lot of people get stuck.
And then you hit seven figures and you're like, this isn't enough. Like we need to keep scaling. We need to get to eight figures. We need to get to nine figures. And then you're just like, but then you have to like, cause you're in the bottle and you don't see how far you've come. And so you kind of feel like, man, I wish I was at 27 million a year. Mm-hmm. And so then it's about like just being more, what would be the proper word? Like just more grateful for where you're at and where you're at in the journey.
Gratitude plays a big part of it.
Yeah.
I remember when we first hit our first seven figures, we were like, wow. And a lot of people were just like in awe, like, how did you ladies do this? Right. And it was like time, effort, energy, grit, but also being smart about delegation and building the team, right? Because the way that it is a lot of female founders hold themselves back, but then they hire out, but then they take it back.
Absolutely.
Because they don't put the trust in somebody else. It's like, you just have to find those people. And then, if that's not the right person, find somebody else and continue that cycle to delegate. Because once you do that, you're like, oh, I have 5 team members. I have 10. Yeah. We have 22. We have 42. Yeah. And so once you start to get to that and release some of the reins as a female founder, that's where the women really start to thrive, as they really focus on their passionate piece.
Right. And I think that you hit a really, really critical point, which is that you can't do everything yourself if you're going to scale. Maybe you can't even do everything yourself if you're going to scale to just even to 1 million. Mm-hmm. I mean, right? I mean, and I don't want to sit here and tell everybody has to have a business that's 7 or 8 figures, because that's not everybody's journey.
Not everybody's
dream. It's not everybody's journey. But for those that do want to do it, there are some, that messy middle part, that middle where you're above 6 figures, but you might be halfway there. That is fraught with so much angst, because you got to deal with your own money issues. You have to deal with the fact that you don't want to hire personnel because you can't, you get somebody in, then you have a bad situation with them. You distrust people in general, so you're kind of like swirling around that whole middle part from about 250,000 to about 750,000, where you're just kind of stuck in your own thing. And I think that it's really helpful to have an outside, to have a coach, to have a mentor, to have a community of,
or even like a financial planner, somebody that can come in there. A coach and a mentor is very important. We've hired multiple coaches out there. I remember when we hired our first coach years ago. We were just like, what is this mastermind thing? Right. Like we're entrepreneurs. We're like diving in and we're like, we got this. Right. And, but we kind of stepped into it. Well, I know myself, because I've gotten so excited. I stepped in with a little bit of ego, right? Yeah. Because we're like, we made this investment. We stepped into a mastermind, and it was about a $10,000 investment for a 6-month program. Yeah. And from there, we turned around and we ended up creating an offer that we supplied and introduced to this mastermind mastermind group. And after we submitted that offer, we had generated about 85,000 in the first like 45 days within that mastermind. That really was like a mindset shift and like a ceiling that like wasn't there, but we're like, now that we were able to do that, what else can we do to help other people?
Naturally, it's easy to build a business just with referrals in the beginning. Like you can get to 200,000, 300,000, exactly, up to, like 800, 900,000.
First $500,000, but based on referrals.
Yeah. And then you get to a point where you just want to scale even higher. And so then you look at acquiring other businesses and Juliet knows a lot about this.
This is a very exciting topic.
It is. And that is something that I don't see women doing, which is growth through acquisition. Entrepreneurs, men particularly, do a lot of that, which is they're identifying other target businesses that will work with their existing business in a number of ways. Either they want to acquire employees and they know of someone in their industry who has a good reputation and good hiring practices and good employees. It might be that it's a different kind of a different note than what they're playing currently, meaning they're in a different vertical, like that you would want to build a companion vertical to. So they might acquire a business for that. And then it might be customer related. So there are a number of reasons why you would want to acquire a business, and finding a target business to acquire, is not necessarily easy, but it's totally doable. And I think for people that want to do it, they should start within their own
industry.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's where we started having different conversations. And a lot of people that I do talk to about with acquisitions, a lot of them are men. I actually went to speak at an event about acquisitions and agencies last month in San Diego. I was the only female speaker there. I was grateful to be asked to speak there. But at the same time, like I was mingling with other people. There's a guy that wants to sell his podcasting in agency. He's a direct competitor, but we found a way to be a partner for him because he does not do podcast booking and we do. So, that I was also asking him, I said, how many clients do you have? Are you looking to sell? And he wants to build it to a certain number and get his EBITDA up, things like that.
Right.
And so what's interesting with that is like, I'm like right there ready. I'm like, I just would love to just purchase those clients, then bring them into this side. And so I have had several conversations with podcasting agencies to acquire. They're just not quite ready to let go. But that's really what we've been.
But then you have like you hear about people that give up on their business completely, and they literally let go of 25 clients or 50 clients. And you're like, you should have sold it. Why didn't you sell it?
We had a competitor that did that. And I didn't know that she just let it go. She literally had family issues and stuff that had to go, and she had to go back to, I think it was Australia or a different country where she was from or had family there. If I would have known that she was just giving up those podcasting clients, like I didn't find out till after she had gone through this, in things going on in her life. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like would have helped take those on and, take that under our belt and help, supply service for these people versus her just, stopping. And so it's like, I wish you could just get in front of more of those people and just let them know, like there are people out there and there are women out there that want to to acquire companies too.
Absolutely. So. And I think the thing is that, that you can always make, so the traditional way to acquire a business, right, is that there's going to be a multiple times your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, what you just called EBITDA, right?
Yes.
And so when you go to buy a business, you take that number that's kind of like, we'll shortcut it, the bottom line, and you're going to multiply that times a multiple. Mm-hmm. It depends on the industry. It depends on the time. They can run either from 2 times EBITDA all the way up to 10. Right? Mm-hmm. And so it really depends on the heat of the industry. It depends on, for example, if you have a business where you have a lot of monthly recurring revenue, that boosts your ability, your times will go up because you have monthly recurring revenue and you're guaranteed a certain revenue stream, which is what somebody who's buying a business loves, right? Mm-hmm. But there are also, if you're looking to acquire, there are other ways. There's as many ways as you can think creatively about this. Mm-hmm. So, I would say two things for the woman you were just kind of talking about. One is, as a business owner, don't just assume that you need to shut your doors. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Because there might be somebody, and no, it might not look like the traditional sale, but it could be a royalty. It could be any number. It's, again, as creative as you want to be, you can be.
Where would you suggest a woman go if they're like looking for resources, websites, things like that? Obviously, you go, was it Biz by Sell? Yes, there's like things like that. They're going to appear with different types of businesses. If you're going for like agencies or brick and mortars, what kind of resources do you think women can go to if they're just even interested in looking into businesses to acquire? So
I think that there's kind of like two ways. I don't necessarily recommend getting on Biz by Sell or one of those. You can, but that is never going to be, for example, if you were looking for podcasting. I've seen one podcasting.
I don't think I've seen any agencies other than a studio.
There's been a studio, right? A physical studio for sale on Biz by Sell. Because I get on Biz by Sell a lot and just kind of monitor what's the activity like. That stuff is usually not great, right? Really, your best bet is to be involved in your industry. Go to industry-related meetings, industry-related organizations. Get to meet people who might know people. The other way to do it is to reach out to a business broker, somebody that you ask for a referral to somebody that you trust as a business broker. There are some bad business brokers out there. But there are some really good ones, right? Yeah. And the thing is, if you establish a relationship with a business broker, they will think of you when they have a listing come in. Because not every listing will hit Biz by Sell or one of the other advertised, things, right? There's a bunch of websites out there like that. So I would say start building your network within your industry. And also there's no harm in reaching out to a business broker and saying, hey, I'm looking to acquire businesses. And this is what I'm looking for. And also, honestly, just telling the people that you know, because you never know when someone might come across a business opportunity that they've heard about somebody who's selling, or they've heard about somebody who had, a crisis of some sort and is looking to offload clients or whatever the situation is. And again, you don't have to buy the whole business, right? You
can buy it in parts too. You can buy a team, you can bring assets.
Exactly.
Even customers. There's different ways you can split up the companies.
Yep. And most of the time you don't want to buy the business. You want to buy the assets. The only time you're going to buy the shares of a business, because the risk there, right, is if you buy the shares of a business, you're buying the liabilities of that business. You don't want that.
We had a scenario. Right. So we put in a bid to purchase basically a podcasting magazine type of thing. So it was stated that they had a certain amount of email lists built over. They built this during COVID, actually. Yeah. So it took off. So we put together this offer. They didn't accept the offer, but we didn't want to purchase every little thing about it. Right. We were like, certain assets were like, email list. Yep. We don't want to necessarily do XYZ. It didn't go through, but everything that doesn't come through wasn't meant to serve us. Right. And so, but it's interesting when you go through those processes and you talk to these individuals to see what makes sense, what not, but they weren't necessarily generating revenue from it. So like they were like, we want to sell for XYZ, but I was like, how are you generating revenue? You built this list, but the way I saw it was the fact that it wasn't like for what they were trying to ask for it at that time didn't make sense to us. So we just said, no, this is not for us. But it's good to look at the numbers. So when people come to you or women come to you, women business owners, how do you, what's the main thing that you do with with women in with acquisitions and things like that?
So when any business owner comes and they're on the buy side, right? So I work on both the buy side and the sell side. I've had, for whatever reason this year, a couple more buy sides starting out than I would typically have. So that's a trickier thing, right? Because on the buy side, you need a team. You got to have a lawyer and you got to have an accountant. Now, it could be your internal accountant, but you got to have somebody that can scrub the numbers if you can't scrub the numbers. And you have to, there's a dance that happens with a buyer where the buyer is really trying to win over the seller in some ways and be, because sometimes sellers, they want to feed the seller's sort of ego, but a lot of times sellers don't have a realistic view of what their business is worth. And that, as a buyer, you can't change. So you might have to, kiss a bunch of frogs before you actually find a really good business to buy. Because a lot of times people, the first thing I would say is make sure you're looking at their, financials, and that if you're not the one to be doing it, you have somebody on your team, like a, CPA who can do that. Because on the sell side, the thing we always tell sellers is that the number one reason people don't sell their business is because their books and records, their financials are a mess.
Oh my gosh.
They're a mess. And so on the buy side, know that going in, that most people keep really, really bad books and records. And so you don't want to buy a business like that. No matter how good it looks. The idea of purchasing assets is a great one. And sometimes you might not even know the value of the asset, but like if you can quantify it in some way, you can buy, cherry pick is what I would say, that you're cherry picking, like a business is, has a great email list and it's good. Well, that's got some value. You may not be able to come to terms from the seller standpoint, what that you're going to, buy it for, because their idea might be inflated. I have people all the time, you guys, who come to me and they'll say something like, I want to sell my business. And I'll say, okay, what's your bottom line revenue? Well, it doesn't really have any, but I'm going to sell it for what I've put into it. That is not how that works. That's not how that works. I don't care how much money you put into the business. It's that money that people are taking out of it. That's how people are buying. But that does happen a lot.
So what is really attractive to buyers? Are we looking at would year contracts look better than 6-month contracts? Have you ever seen 2-year contracts? What do they look
that's
for?
going to be really industry dependent.
Okay.
Right. But if you have, if you have a monthly recurring revenue kind of a business, that's better than not having that. Right. And, having written agreements is better than not having any written agreements, right? And having contracts like, supplier and vendor contracts, that's better than not having any contracts, right? So it really, really depends on the business itself, what you should look at as red flags. But you want a diligence. So when you put in an offer to buy a business, you come up with, what the purchase price is going to be, what the assets are that you're buying or whatever. Then you're going to spend the next 40-ish days, right, looking at all of their stuff. You're going to look at the contracts. That's why you need help usually with an attorney and a CPA. Of course. You're going to look at the financials. You're going to try as best as you can to diligence what's actually going on in that business. And then the other mistake I see people making all the time is they don't want to spend the money on a lawyer. I'm here to say, please spend the money on a lawyer.
And they get screwed over.
But besides the fact that you have to have that, because you want, even though you diligence a business and you think you know what's going on inside the business, you want the seller to make you promises that are in writing called representations and warranties. You want to know and have them promise, yes, this is the condition of this asset. This is the condition of these employees. You want them to make a promise, because if God forbid something goes awry and you get in and you go, holy mother of what the heck is going on here, you won't have any recourse if you do not have those things that you would typically see in a purchase agreement.
We were just talking to somebody that their company's looking at being acquired, and they're actually auditing all the employees. Like, and the employees are like, I don't know what to say. Like, they're asking like, how's this client account doing? How do you feel like this is a good client account? Is it stable? And some of them, if they know it's a little rocky, they're just like, I don't want to say that. Like, what can they say? Can they get sued, like theirself, if they say something that could?
No, likely not. But that's interesting, because most of the time, a seller doesn't want the buyer to have, the seller need better boundaries there, because you wouldn't want, what happens if the sale doesn't close? Now your employees all know you're out, you've been shopping it around. I mean, that's like, if I was that lawyer for that, I'd be like, do not agree to that. That's a problem. You can have, key management members who can talk about those things. Right.
And that's this case. So the individual we were talking with literally was first thinking like, well, what's going to happen if I provide too much information to the person that's looking to purchase? Or, like, I also don't want to say too much on the side of my current job. Right. So
absolutely.
So they had like attorneys and other things coming in. So he's afraid to turn around and, share certain information. Yeah. But it turned out in his favor, where he actually was like, they came back and they're like, we actually want this individual to actually move over with when we make the purchase. Right. So he was rather freaked out because he wasn't quite sure what was going on. And then he was like, well, now we're back into negotiations, and they actually want to acquire the company with me as one of the lead individuals and team members. So it made that anxiety turn around and like lessen on his part. So, so he's like, whew, and so employees don't want that type of stress either, or team members, because he's been with the company a long time.
And depending on how that goes, right, they may see that you don't, that's not necessarily somebody I want to be involved. Not just the employee seeing that, but the employee might see, hey, I'm really not down with this company that's coming in. So it's a real risk for a seller to allow too many people to be kind of talking to employees prior, even if they're in leadership positions. You have to play that kind of carefully. Because sales fall out all the time and don't close. And then you're left with a really hinky situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I could talk about this topic all day long.
Me too.
I'm going to have you share a little bit with our audience how they can connect with you.
Awesome. So you can reach out to me on my website, which is frameworklegal.com, or you can email me directly at juliet@frameworklegal.com, and you'll find Framework Legal on Instagram, on Facebook, and of course, I'm on LinkedIn. So really fun to do.
We're
this.
So glad you came.
Thank you for having me.
It's been great.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Juliet, for joining us today. And Danielle, thank you for co-hosting this series with me. And super grateful for both you women. Those that are thinking about acquiring a company or stepping out of your comfort zone, or really just interested in stepping up into joining, making that 1.9% a bit larger. We want to make it a lot larger at this point in life. And that's what really our goal and mission is to do, is to help women in business get to their 7 figures and beyond, 8 figures, you name it. And you've got what it takes to do it. So definitely follow us on all of our social medias and subscribe. Again, this is Women Unlocking Wealth, brought to you by Broadcast Your Authority. And we'll see you in the next episode.